it's hard to know what's true because there's over 1,000 reports in newspapers of these findings. But the mainstream narrative is it was giants were cool at the time. It was hoaxes, and it was just to make money. But it's just too many coincidences. And there's one giant story that's interesting, that because it overlaps several cultures, native cultures, where you've got them in like the Mississippi Valley, they have these Indian myths about these giants they're cannibals. So they're eating the people, and they get driven west by the tribes. They unite and drive them west into like Nevada and California, and they end up at what's known as Lovelock Cave. And the Lovelock Cave giants are famous giants. They're the red-haired giants. So the story goes that they're at war with all these tribes. And during the war, when the natives are falling, they're like eating them in the battlefield. So it unites the tribes, and they drive them into Lovelock Cave, and they seal the cave, and they set fire to the whole place. And an archaeologist goes in there and finds sandals that are like size 29, and these giant clothes that, like, I'm not making this part up. You can go see this. Like, why is there a sandal that's this size, that are all found in the cave, and bones and red hair? But, and all that stuff has been sent back, and then it's just gone. And as recently as just maybe like 20 years ago, at some point, someone discovered these giant coffins with lids on them, and they were sent to the Smithsonian.
Was there anything in the coffin?
Not that I'm aware of, but they were coffins, and they were big. And native cultures didn't do that. They didn't have coffins or bury their dead. At least none that I'm aware of. That was not part of their culture. So this was very strange. So those were sent to the Smithsonian, and then it kind of disappeared. But then not too long ago, someone picked up on the story and asked the Smithsonian about them, and they said, "We do have record of receiving that, but we don't know where they are." And that was kind of the end of it. And then a few years later, someone else got involved. I think it was John Tierney. John Tierney really went after Smithsonian hard. He wrote a book about, like, Smithsonian is the greatest cover-up. So it might have been Tierney that he said, "Okay, I know that you said you received these. You can't find them. I need you to find them." And they said, "Okay, we found them. But they're in a warehouse it's got an asbestos problem. So no one could go in there." And he said, "Well, when can we go in there?" And they said, "About 10 years. And that was really the last of it. So the Smithsonian gets wrapped up in all these weird conspiracies. There's the Acombaro statues, which is very controversial, which is like 3,000 artifacts that show humans riding dinosaurs. They show Asians, Africans, races that shouldn't be around there, that are carbon dated to 2,500 years ago, 3,500 years ago. And they're sent to Smithsonian. The Smithsonian said, "Yeah, these things are 30 years old. They're a hoax." But they were independently validated by other labs saying, "No, these things are really, really old." Smithsonian's like, "Nah, it's a hoax." And then as time goes on, all those other labs become discredited, like, "Oh, their techniques weren't modern." And that's kind of where the Acombaro has ended up, as far as I know. Because I don't know if anyone really cares enough to follow up on stuff like that. I do. So I kind of want to know, like, what do you have down there? I think they have almost 1 billion artifacts that we can't see.